the addiction is not the problem. The reason that we don't treat addiction very well, which is actually, to say that we don't treat it very well is an understatement, is precisely because we don't get that the addiction is not the problem. The addiction is an adaptation. And let me just give you my definition of addiction. Any behavior that gives you temporary relief, pleasure, that you crave, and that you pursue despite negative consequences. So that's an addiction. Any behavior. Drugs, sex, gambling, internet, relationships, work, whatever it is, eating. It's any behavior that provides temporary relief and pleasure, and you crave despite the negative consequences. So that's an addiction. So let me ask you, by that definition, how many of you would agree that at some time or another you've had some kind of addictive pattern in your life? Just raise your hands, would you? Okay, all right. So let me ask some of you that are willing to say so. And I'm not going to ask you what you're addicted to or when or for how long, but simply, what did it do for you? Not what was wrong with it, but what did you like about it? Okay, so anybody? Yes? It gave you pleasure. Okay, great. Thank you. Who else? Yes. I'm sorry? Avoidance. Okay, avoidance of conflict. Thank you. Yes. It eases the pain. Yes. Distraction from the pain. Okay, great. So thank you. I mean, we could go on, but can you see that everything you said, easing of pain, avoidance of conflict, pleasure, these are normal human aspirations. There's nothing wrong with any of them. In other words, the addiction wasn't your problem. Your problem is, how come on God's green earth you could find no pleasure? Something had blocked your capacity to experience pleasure and joy. Something had created so much conflict in your life that you had to escape from it. Something had given you so much pain that you needed distraction or relief from the pain. And hence my mantra, the first question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And that pain goes back to that original disconnection. And so my other teacher, A.H. Almas, says, speaking about childhood, the fundamental thing that happened and the greatest calamity is not that there was no love or support. The greater calamity, which is caused by that first calamity, is that you lost the connection to your essence. That is much more important than whether your mother or father loved you or not. And by extension, I'm going to make the perhaps astonishing statement that the fundamental problem was not that you were sexually abused, was not that you were beaten, was not that you were abandoned, not that your parents couldn't love you the way you needed to be loved. It's that as a result of all that, you lost the connection to yourself. That's the trauma. So there's the external event, then the impact. And although it's impossible to have it happen this way, but had you been beaten and abused, but had that not resulted in the disconnect from yourself, you would not have been traumatized. And so that what are we looking for then is that reconnection with ourselves. And the loss of connection itself is an adaptation. Why is that an adaptation? Because if it's so painful to be myself, I better disconnect. If it's so painful for me to be aware of my gut feelings and to be able to assert them and to manifest them and to declare them, I better disconnect from my gut feelings. And it's that connection from the gut feeling, which happens right in the body, that's the trauma. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to compensate. How do we compensate? Well, through addiction. Or we compensate by developing certain personality patterns that then will somehow try to get us indirectly what we didn't get in the first place, which is the love that would have allowed us to connect to ourselves. So then we become our personalities. At least we become who we think we are as a personality. So if you didn't get the attention that you needed as a child, just for yourself, then you might become consumed by attracting attention, then you're going to be attractive all the time. And hence the $30 billion cosmetic surgery industry, because people have lost the connection to themselves, and now they want validation from the outside. Or you didn't get the approval you needed for who you were, now you want to win approval from others as a substitute. You weren't valued for who you were, now you're consumed by measuring up to others' expectations so that you can get your sense of value through what others think of you, what other people think of you. You weren't esteemed for who you are, now you're going to be wanting to impress people all the time. And then these are all adaptations. These are all adaptations. But we mistake ourselves for adaptations. And then because we couldn't be ourselves, because being ourselves would have meant too much pain, too much suffering, too much vulnerability. Vulnerability, the Latin word vulnerare, to wound. Our wound would be too raw. We cover up our vulnerability by these compensatory mechanisms, and we close our hearts. And when we close our hearts, we no longer know how to love ourselves or others. And we no longer have pleasure or joy. And then you have the statement by Meister Eckhart, who's the 13th century spiritual master, who says, a human being has so many skins inside, covering the depths of the heart. We know so many things, but we don't know ourselves. Again, that loss of self. Why? 30 or 40 skins or hides, as thick and as hard as an ox's or a bear's, cover the soul. And he says, go into your ground and learn to know yourself there. Well, why to develop these skins, these hides? These are the compensations. These are how we try and protect ourselves from that woundedness. And that same adaptation that helped us endure those early losses, and primarily the loss of ourselves, then become our burden, then become our separation from the world. That's the source of our alienation. And the problem is, this doesn't only happen on an individual level, it happens in a social level. Because we live in a society that actually is profoundly alienated. And we live in a society that actually validates our invalidity. We live in a society that validates our false self. So that not only do we develop these compensatory mechanisms, it's even that we're rewarded for it. So the world rewards it, and so as the author of the book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying says, the greatest achievement of modern culture is the brilliant selling of samsara. Samsara is the cycle of suffering, and its barren distractions. Modern society seems to me a celebration of all the things that lead away from truth, make truth hard to live for, and discourage people even from believing that it exists. So not only do we suffer this trauma because our parents are unconscious or so hurt themselves that they simply couldn't help traumatizing us, we then have a world that validates the falseness, that validates the personality which was developed as a compensation for the loss. And that's why it's so difficult.